Hey, what's going on, guys? It's your boy, lONl, and I'll be doing my next installment of my Let's Talk About Me series. This is a video series where I have the opportunity and the privilege to tell you guys about key moments within my life and hopefully share some stories along the way. For this particular episode, I will be talking about my first introduction to the multiplayer experience for consoles and giving you guys some inside stories and some information along the way. So, hopefully you guys will enjoy, but without further ado, let's jump right into it. So as many of you guys know, the original consoles constantly known as the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, the Xbox, Atari, anything even farther back than that, really didn't have a multiplayer kind of platform. That's not what they were originally built for. However, I am aware that the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox did have the ability to go play multiplayer online. But many of you guys will probably remember back to your reminiscent days of playing the old consoles and go, I didn't really buy those consoles for multiplayer. However, if you're an Xbox person and that's the only one you've ever played, you probably did buy the Xbox for multiplayer. I am aware that Xbox Live was available at the beginning, and that was a service that was kind of marketed towards the gamers. However, if you're kind of old school and you played a lot of the Nintendo 64, the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, even then, you kind of bought games because your friends had them. You bought games because you were young, you wanted to play the campaign, you wanted to play the co-op maybe with your brother or sibling. Maybe you wanted to play them with your cousins when they came over. They were a great way to kind of have entertainment at the best time of era. The games for them were kind of easy. They were a lot more consistent. There really wasn't anything that was glorified in the community at the time. And you just kind of played games because you were young, you were bored, and you had about an hour to screw, and you kind of wanted to do something. So with that in mind, however, when multiplayer was introduced, at least for me, I was blown away. I didn't even know a service existed. I'm sure many of you guys remember the old days of looking on the back of the cover and making sure you could play with your brother or sister or whatever you were wanting to do, and you wanted to make sure that the amount of players was available so both of you guys could play. You could split screen, you could do whatever. With that in mind, however, multiplayer adds that plus more things to it. It obviously adds a service to where you can do as you so wish. Now, when I was introduced to the actual multiplayer is because of my cousin Kyle. Kyle's probably one of my good friends, good cousin. I like him. Everything seems to work out in that favor. However, we kind of drift apart nowadays because we're sufficiently older and our likes and dislikes are a little bit more prevalent in each other's, ideal position. Popularity obviously plays into a big role in that. Some people will disagree, but in my standard, I think that kind of makes you the person that you kind of want to become, and you kind of do things in a certain action to impress your popularity level. That's fine. That's not a big deal, but I'm just putting that out there to let you guys know that, spreading apart from cousins, friends, anything can be consistent even nowadays and even in the past. So, with that in mind, what would happen is I didn't have internet at the time, so a lot of the games I played were campaign and co-op. I played a lot of Lord of the Rings back in the day. Star Wars was a great game. I remember the Battlefront series. Phenomenal game. Great games, had a lot of fun, played hundreds of hours into each of them. And that was a lot for at the time because, well, I really liked going outside. I was an outside person. I know that's kind of weird telling you now because, well, I do a lot of stuff indoors now. I'm, obviously making YouTube videos and having a career that's kind of set up in the same format, followed by doing a lot of working. So a lot of my daily routine is now inside instead of what it used to be. But as a kid, you kind of hated being inside because, well, it's just kind of how it was. You liked going out, you liked playing, and liked having fun. So how was I introduced to the multiplayer? And this is a question that is kind of cool. With that in mind, however, the first time I was ever introduced to the multiplayer experience was at our grandparents, and it's because at the time I didn't have internet, as I explained, but my cousin's parents, or my cousin's, yeah, that's right, cousin's parents or his parents or whatever, were not together. So unfortunately, he would do trips, back and forth from his mom and his dad's house. They lived in completely different cities. So when he would come, he would bring his console and, he got to showcase the multiplayer experience. And I always look forward to that. What would happen is the first time I got introduced and the first game I had ever played was Call of Duty 4. However, Call of Duty 4 had probably been out for, 3-4 months or something like that. I mean, it wasn't a great new game, but it was still in its new cycle. It wasn't, leaving. It wasn't an old game by any means necessary. However, it was still a great game. So what would happen is we'd go over to our grandparents because they had a new house, they were really rich, and they just had amazing internet at the time. And, well, I liked going there because I never had internet, so it was kind of cool to be able to check up on YouTube, which was the first time I ever found YouTube. I didn't even know what it was. And with that in mind, we'd hook it up, play on there 50-inch TV or whatever it is. And, you know, he would play a lot of the time. I would spectate, I would watch, I would just really enjoy what was going on because this was all new to me. This was like fresh out of the box. I never even knew you could play with people. You could hear people talking, people raging, people calling each other, you know, names and stuff like that. And it was a great time. Now, of course, he was on PlayStation 3, so you'd always get those messages like camper or whatever, and that's just kind of how that platform runs, and that's fine. Of course, Xbox 360, the opposite would be telling you that you're some username and just going on and on about it while you're crying in the mist. Something of that equivalency. But it was kind of cool because, you know, he would disconnect the mic, we would kind of troll people, play some music in the mic, and, well, looking back, it was kind of childish, but of course, we were really young. I mean, I want to say that we were probably 10 or so, you know, somewhere in that age group. So we were the squeakers of that time period. And it's kind of ironic to look back on that and go, wow, that's exactly how that played out. But with that in mind, the first time that I ever got my hands-on experience was at the grandparents', but he kind of let me play, but he was a lot more strict. He was kind of like what I am now. I don't like people playing on my account. It's for a lot of reasons. One, I work really hard for my stats, and two, it seems like the people you meet in real life are usually worse players than the people you meet online. That's kind of true in multiple occasions because you're attracted to people that are better at the centralized game. So, you know, he might let me play one game, he might play 15 games after, and we'd kind of go like that. However, I would spend a lot of time watching, and I kind of enjoyed it, but it wasn't like playing the game, and I would still get very frustrated even when I played it because I was expected in my head to perform at top notch. I imagined I was some MLG pro, though I had never even heard of the multiplayer experience. That just gives you an ideal situation that I just kind of went into it going, oh, well, I've played single player games, so it's got to be about the same, right? No, unfortunately, people were pretty good, or at least good for me being scrubby McDubby in the lobby, so they could have even been bad players too, but you never know. So that was the first time I'd ever played it. And he would make a couple of trips back and forth, you know, he'd kind of let me play a little bit, but it was never enough. I mean, I always wanted to play more, I always wanted to get more into it, even when I was frustrated. And what would happen later is he would show us World at War, and believe it or not, that would be the first Call of Duty that I ever bought, or the first game that I officially ever bought. And it was one of the best games that I've probably ever played in my life. I think World at War is probably the most balanced game, though the MP40 was still kind of broken, but it's Call of Duty, so we've already discussed this stuff by itself. What would happen is when he showed that to us, a day later we would actually, me and my brother would hook up money because, well, I didn't have a job, none of us detasseled because that wasn't available, and with that in mind, we would add up our money from Christmas and birthday and all that stuff, and believe it or not, we would actually split the cost and buy a PlayStation 3. So me and my cousin would play a little bit, but I usually took the reins. I wanted to play more than anybody because I wanted to get good. You know, I've always done things, I've always been a perfectionist in some categories. I'm not 100% a perfectionist, believe it or not, but I do like to play games, I like to perform at top notch, I like to be expected to be a consistent player. That's obviously, if you guys have played with me, you'll understand my frustrations when things don't go according to plan. So, of course, we would get the game a day later, and we would start playing, and I would spend a lot of time, I would start leveling up the character, and, believe it or not, I would actually get my first official good kill-death ratio. However, the problem was I never really want my brother to play, so I was kind of like switching the roles. I was almost Kyle in the instance, and my brother was almost me. And what would happen is, later we would figure out that we could make separate accounts. I never knew you could do that because, well, it's not really plain and simple. I mean, for people that have never played on an online game, never really been exposed to it, it was kind of a different dashboard. It was completely different than what we were used to. Now, of course, some of you guys will ask, how were you playing online if you didn't have internet? That is a very good question. We would actually hook it up in the corner of the house, and we could actually get the internet connection from our neighbors. And we would steal internet. And it was kind of the coolest thing ever because we could use like Windows, because the PlayStation 3 has obviously the search bar. And we would do that for probably about a couple of months, and then later we upgraded to an internet package, and I would play a lot of SOCOM. I pretty much maxed out World at War. I played with my cousin a little bit, his friends, we became good friends in that circumstance. Now, of course, all good things have to come to an end, and a lot of them would change their minds and become a little bit more of a interesting character. I guess that's the best way to place it. So, yeah, guys, I mean, that's kind of my story. I was never really good at Call of Duty until I made my official own account. Then I would, start the launch on the Kill Death Whoring, and I would meet my first clan named Dozer. I would be with them for approximately 2 years, and then I would switch over to a different platform. Now, it was obviously really cool to be exposed to the multiplayer. Many of you guys probably remember your first game or your first game that you bought. It was still a great experience, and I'm glad I actually have the luxury of telling you guys about it, but also still remembering the memories. You know, it was a great time to actually connect with my cousin because we were good friends, but, you know, he wasn't always in town. You know, he would come every other week or even every triple week, so it's not like we saw each other all the time, and when we did see each other, it was like, hey, you want to go play some Call of Duty? Like, hell yeah, let's go play some Call of Duty. And it was just a great time, and I remember all the good memories, and I'm sure a lot of you guys remember memories with your friends, may that be co-ops, single player, LAN parties, even multiplayer, hooking up with 6 guys and just pub stomping for days. And I'll still never forget when we got our first headset. That was one of the best days ever, because it was one of those cheap, terrible ones that you're always like, dude, turn your mic off, they suck. And yeah, that's just kind of what would happen, guys. But anyway, that's been my story. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next installment. This is NMO, and I'll be signing out. Peace.